of these structures, and this is a pretty good cutaway view. So, first of all, just a couple what are called sinuses. The sinuses are holes inside 4 of the cranial bones, and there's a couple of these sinuses that you can see on this model. And the sinuses are lined by a mucous membrane, and the mucus that's secreted actually flows down tiny little tubes that aren't shown on this model and empty into the nasal cavities. But this would be the frontal bone that forms your forehead, so that's the frontal sinus. And you can see the pituitary gland hanging from a stalk. And the pituitary gland would be in the sella turcica of what bone? Sphenoid bone, absolutely. So this would be the sphenoidal sinuses in the sphenoid bone. You can see them near the pituitary. And this would be the frontal sinus in the frontal bone. Of course, this is the external nares. That'd just be these nostrils. And then you come into the nasal cavity. And the hole at the end of the nasal cavity, which would be at the top of your pharynx, is the internal nares. So you've got actually 2 of each of these, 1 for each nasal cavity. Okay, there's 3 tonsils that you need to know. They're pretty easy. So, this would be your throat that we call the pharynx. And right here at the top of the pharynx, with this orange color, is the pharyngeal tonsil on the side of the pharynx. So that's easy. Do y'all remember that if you press the tip of your tongue against the roof of your mouth, you're pressing it against the palate, like the hard palate? And this tonsil right here, associated with the roof of the mouth or the hard palate, is the palatine tonsil. So that's pretty easy. And then lingual means tongue. Do y'all remember that from way back? Okay, so if you look, here's the tongue. Big skeletal muscle under voluntary control, because you can wiggle your tongue and curl it and stick it out, and it only makes sense that it would be a skeletal muscle that you can voluntarily control. Of course, do it all the time when you wiggle your tongue as you talk. So right in back of the tongue is the lingual tonsil. So pharyngeal, palatine, lingual, the 3 tonsils. So here's your tongue, here's your mouth. Okay. The palatine tonsils are part of a flap that extends off the hard palate that forms the bony portion of the roof of the mouth. And this flap right here is called the uvula. And if you open your mouth really wide and look into the mirror, you'll see a triangular shaped structure kind of sticking down, and that's the uvula. So what happens is when you eat, the uvula swings up to seal off the nasopharynx, and that helps to direct food and water down. So you can even drink, when you're like laying down, because gravity is going to pull it down. But even if you're, hanging back or laying down, this is kind of a mechanism that prevents food and drink from going up into the nasal cavities. So that's the uvula, and it swings up when you swallow. Now, this little flap right here, and it's a little more difficult to see, but I'll just trace it because it really doesn't look like a flap. And it's a hard plastic model, so it's in an open position, so is this. But this little flap right there at the beginning of my finger, it's got a little blue elastic cartilage inside of it. That's the epiglottis. And when you swallow, the epiglottis swings down over this hole that my finger is in, called the glottis. So when you swallow, this swings up to seal that off. And the epiglottis, that little flap right there, swings down to seal that off, and food and water just continues down the pharynx to the esophagus, to the stomach, to the intestine. Okay, so uvula, epiglottis, the hole, not a structure, but the hole is the glottis, and the glottis leads into the larynx. The walls of the larynx are reinforced with hyaline cartilage. Cartilage, wherever you see it on the model, is in blue. So this would be the hyaline cartilage wall of your larynx, just beneath the chin. And you can feel it as, I guess some people call it the Adam's apple. Because presumably back in the days of Genesis, when Adam ate the forbidden fruit, it got stuck in his throat, and it's been there ever since. Or so the story goes. Okay. There are a couple folds of the lining of the larynx that make up the vocal cords. And the vocal cords vibrate when you exhale. And when something vibrates, it makes a sound. Okay, we're very adept at wiggling and shaping our tongue in order to shape the sounds that come out of our body. Most animals can't do that. So a dog is almost confined to that kind of sound, or woof. But we can actually sing. If you've got a great, Celine Dion kind of voice, all the way through 7 octaves on a piano. From the really, really low notes to going into falsetto, the higher octaves. And one of the reasons we can do that is we can maneuver our tongue. We can also change the shape of the voice box to thin out or thicken up those vocal cords. And all of that taken together gives humans an incredible range of sounds that we can make. It's unrivaled by any other animal on the planet. And that's one of the kind of cool things about humans. Of course, walking upright, opposable thumb to grasp things, and this range of vocalizations that allowed us to develop a language so we can talk to each other. Because quite honestly, even if a dog or a cat had some really complex, intellectual, profound thought, they couldn't share it. And because they can't share it and they can't verbalize it, they can't ever write it down. And because they can't ever write it down, they can't pass it on to the next generation, right? So they can't accumulate knowledge the way we can just because of our speech. We turn into a language and a written language, and we record things. And that allows us to seriously pick up all the accumulated knowledge of all the human beings that came before us since, of course, the time of written history. And that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Okay, so do take a look at this model, because you can see a lot of things in the colorway. All right, then, let me go over the lung lobule. We did this last week, but let's do it one more time. Okay. That's good now. All right, so this would be the diaphragms right here.